Today, we're talking about a man who was, in a lot of ways, the voice of the British Empire. A historian whose books sold like crazy, and a politician whose ideas shaped the lives of millions. His name was Thomas Babington Macaulay, and his story is a wild ride into how powerful words can be, how they can build and break entire worlds. And that's really the big question here, isn't it? He wasn't just recording history, he was actively crafting a narrative, a blueprint for the world as he saw it. And that blueprint had huge consequences, stretching all the way from the halls of Parliament in London to classrooms in Calcutta. All right, so here's our game plan first. We'll see just what a big deal this guy was in Victorian Britain. Then we'll get into his game-changing approach to writing history. After that, we dive into the really controversial stuff, his work in colonial India. And finally, we'll try to sort through his complicated legacy today. Okay, let's jump in. To really get Macaulay, you have to realize he wasn't some quiet scholar tucked away in a library. In 19th century Britain, the man was basically a rock star of public life. I mean, just look at this list. He wasn't just one of these things. He was all of them, sometimes at the same time. Think about it. He's writing essays that everyone's reading, he's in Parliament debating new laws, and as Secretary of War, he's helping to run a global empire. He was right there, at the absolute heart of Victorian power and culture. But of all those jobs, it was being a historian that really made him a legend. Before Macaulay, a lot of history books were, well, they were pretty dry. He's the one who came along and turned history into a page-turner. And his most famous work, The History of England, was a total publishing sensation. Seriously, people lined up for it. He took this complex period of political history and made it feel like a gripping novel that anybody could get into. So what was his secret sauce? Well, it was all in how he told the story. He'd paint these vivid portraits of historical figures, he'd frame events with all this drama, and he always had a very clear good guy, bad guy perspective. For Macaulay, history wasn't just a bunch of stuff that happened, it was an epic story about the inevitable triumph of progress and liberty. And that brings us to this key idea, Whig history. Think of it like a nation's superhero origin story. He basically saw the past as this long, steady climb, with every event leading directly to the peak of civilization, which of course was his own Victorian Britain. It was a super compelling story, but as you can imagine, it got a lot of criticism for being way too simple and incredibly biased. And this is where things get really complicated, because this belief in one single, superior path of progress, it wasn't just a theory for his books. It became the actual foundation for his work when he was tasked with shaping policy for the British Empire in India. It all came to a head in this one document, the Minute on Indian Education. In it, Macaulay laid out this incredibly bold vision. He basically argued that the entire education system in India needed to be scrapped and replaced with a Western one. And this is probably his most infamous quote. It's hard to even wrap your head around the confidence, some would say arrogance, of these words. In a single sentence, he just casually dismissed centuries of Indian and Arabic literature, science, and philosophy as worthless compared to European knowledge. So what was the fallout? Well, English became the language of government, of power, of education, and the stated goal was to create a whole new class of people who were, in his own words, Indian in blood and color, but English in taste, in opinions, in morals, and in intellect. It definitely created a new system, but one built on erasing local culture. And that sparked a debate that is still going on right now. Which brings us to today. How in the world are we supposed to think about a guy like Macaulay now? As you can probably guess, his legacy is split right down the middle. And this really lays it all out. On the one hand, you can't deny his brilliance. The man could write. He made history exciting for millions. And he was a passionate defender of liberty and reform. At least back in Britain. But then there's the other side of the coin. He was the ultimate voice of colonialism, with a deeply biased Eurocentric view of the world that caused real, lasting damage. So that leaves us with this final, massive question. When we look back at these towering figures who absolutely shaped the world we live in, how do we weigh their achievements against their prejudices? Can you separate the brilliant author from the colonial architect? It's a tough one. And thinking about it probably tells us just as much about ourselves as it does about the past.